Hi everyone, Simon Bell here, Professor of Marketing at the University of Melbourne. It's a pleasure to be here today and share with you in the next 4 minutes some thoughts that I have on the future of marketing strategy research. I can't do the whole field justice, so I've zoomed in on one particular theory that marketers love and use a lot, not always that well, I might add, namely resource-based view of the firm and its variants, dynamic capabilities theory, etc. So where can we go with this theory? How can we make a contribution? How can we use it more effectively to explain market competitive advantage in firms and the effectiveness of marketing strategy? Well, I've got 4 things I think we can do. The first is to go back to its micro foundations. Look, this recommendation can apply to almost any framework you use, but it really is required, I think, in RBV. Let's go back to some of the assumed notions of ability or what it is to create something or extend a resource or modify it. What does the process of modification actually entail? The word reconfigure is used a lot. I read it in a lot of papers, but not always sure what it actually means. Anyway, you get the picture. Let's go back to exploring micro foundations. Second, how do resources and capabilities interact? Mostly the research is used to justify the application of one particular resource or capability, maybe market orientation or something similar, and how it affects an outcome within the firm. But firms are constellations of resources. And the question I would have is, well, is competitive advantage the result of the summation of those or their interaction? Probably the latter, but we don't know. We haven't got good theories to explain why that's the case or indeed how that interaction works. And I think that's a real opportunity. Third, I think we should go back to notions of orientations, of resources as measured by marketers. We love to measure things. And ask the question, have we got the aggregation question right here? I think there are levels issues that we have glossed over. And here's an example for you. Market orientation in firm A as measured with the Nava and Slater model would be considered the same as market orientation level in firm B. Well, I look at those two and say, no, they're not. They are completely different firms. That raises for me the notions of thresholds, levels, etc. in the component parts of resources like market orientation. Could that be a way of making a contribution to the theory itself? I think so. And I think the way, if we revisit some of these ideas, there are incredible opportunities to make contributions and publish. And the final one, and you probably noticed this in your own reading of the research, is this notion of dynamic considerations. I think we're seeing a dynamic turn within the literature. Rob Parmentier, an editor of JM at the moment, has published a number of papers on dynamic considerations. So that's always a pretty good sign when the editor of JM is doing that. So I think that we need to look into this theory, RBV, more carefully as in terms of dynamic considerations. For example, what pathways or trajectories followed by firms lead to constraining effects, so limiting of strategic choice, versus enhancing or facilitating effects from time 1 to time 2. Embedded in the firm is this notion of equifinality, the idea that an endpoint can be achieved through multiple pathways. If that's an assumption of RBV, then why not go and explore that very foundational assumption, a bit like the micro foundation recommendation I made a few minutes ago. So they're my 4 ideas, my 4 contributions that you can make to this theory. I hope they've been of interest to you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your doctoral colloquium. It's sad that I can't be there. Hopefully I'll be there for Q&A on the day. And my best wishes for your PhD studies in the years ahead.
Hello, I'm Liliana Bove, a professor in marketing, and my passion in research is service marketing. But before I give you my opinion as to future directions of service marketing research, I think it's important to understand the backdrop in which our research is taking place. And that is the global and political unrest and, of course, the pandemic. And this brings about contingency factors such as fear and uncertainty. Therefore, it's really important for brands to understand how best they can signal security, safety, control, and of course, well-being. The other thing that the pandemic, I guess, has shown us is that there has been an acceptance, or it has sped up the acceptance of remote operating models and the delivery of service through digital platforms. But this doesn't mean that customer expectations have changed. They still expect responsiveness and personalization and a seamless experience when they cross different brand channels. But lastly, we shouldn't forget about the role of the service employee. Their roles have changed. The pandemic has shown us that they've had to work remotely and that some of their tasks have been substituted by robots or by artificial intelligence, by chatbots. So what does it mean for the service employee? How can we make sure that they are retained, that they are motivated, that their capabilities are what make brands special, memorable, differentiated? What is the future of work for service employees? Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Anish Nagpal and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Management and Marketing at the Faculty of Business and Economics at the University of Melbourne. Today I've been asked to speak to you about the future of consumer research. Will the kinds of topics that we as consumer researchers examine be any different from what they are now? Will the methods we use to examine these topics on consumer behavior be any different from what they are now? By no means can I answer this question fully. I wish I had a crystal ball to help me look into the future, but since I don't, I present here my musings, which in my view represent a combination of prediction, desire, and hope. The way I'd like to talk about the topic today on future of consumer behavior is in the form of relationships, an examination and re-examination of our relationships with the many things we interact with might provide us researchers with a number of fertile topics for research. The first relationship I want to talk about and I present to you are consumer relations with the self. I think the last 7 to 8 months have given us a lot of time to self-reflect about many things and question our past consumption and think about our future decisions. We have thought about what is important to us, what really matters. I think this self-reflection may bring about a change in what we consume, how much we consume, and where we consume. For example, the lockdown has shown us that we can survive without a lot of unnecessary material goods, and what we really miss are the experiences. Hence, in my view, experiential goods will get a lot more of our consumption share in the future. Consumer researchers can hang on to these kind of topics on the self, our identity, how identity impacts and changes, and that is a potential topic that will gain further interest. The second relationship is to do with our relationship with our health. My feeling is that in the last 7 to 8 months, many of us have had not the time nor the energy to focus on health, which is a little ironic given that it is a health-related issue, the virus that has pretty much occupied our lives. But because that brought about a change in the way we live, a lot of adjustment of our lives, health too, took a bit of a backseat. I think as we come out of the lockdown, the health industry focus on what we eat, how much we eat, exercise, mental health is going to be on steroids. In our own ways, we will each focus on getting a little healthier. I believe this presents an interesting avenue for research, especially because the topic of health is interdisciplinary, involving psychology, medicine, nutrition, marketing, etc., which, by the way, is now going to be the norm for consumer research. Interdisciplinary is the way forward. I think too often we have made a trade-off, sacrificing breadth of research for depth, but I think we as consumer researchers now need to look at consumer phenomena from multiple lenses. That is the future, in my humble opinion. The third aspect is our relationship with others, friends, family, etc. I think it is safe to say that that this year, the one thing that we have all missed out on is our social life, because the mantra of survival has been social distancing. Self-reflection and living in isolation for this period of 7 to 8 months has shown us how important it is for us humans to interact with others. I believe that this basic urge to interact with others will have an impact on consumption, and this lends itself to a deeper examination by us consumer researchers. Consumption activities that bring people together, team activities such as team sports, arts, theater, cultural activities, festivals, holidays are all going to be looked at in a different light. And we as consumers are going to be drawn to such types of consumption. What this means for researchers is that there is a need for deeper understanding of what it means to socially interact, how we interact, and the impact it can have on our short-term and, more importantly, long-term lives. And this is definitely worth questioning and examining. The fourth relationship is our relationship with technology. Technology is already a part of every aspect of our life, but it's going to become an all-important, all-consuming aspect in the future. Technology brings with itself new means of collecting data, new ways to analyze and interpret data for consumer researchers. Newer technologies have made it easier to gather large amounts of data, as well as make the entire process more efficient. For those of us who have been reluctant to accept these new technologies because of our nostalgia of the good old days, unfortunately, there is no longer a way out. Not only will technology change the manner in which we do consumer research, but consumer interactions with technology, how we interact with technology, how we integrate technology into our lives also presents a fertile ground for research. And how does technology impact our everyday lives, our consumption activities? All of that, those kind of topics are essentially human interaction with technology, and its downstream impact on consumption is ripe for future research. Last, given that COVID-19 has dominated our lives in the last year, I guess, of 2020, I think understanding the impact of crisis on people's consumption is also ripe for examination. How does consumption change during a crisis? Do we return to our old ways of consuming after the crisis has passed? Or do these changes stay permanent with us? These are the kind of questions that are definitely worth considering. I know I have run out of time now. So bottom line, I do believe that humans are creatures of habit, but yet they yearn to change. And what I mean by that is that the future of consumption and consumer behavior research, on the one hand, will be somewhat similar to what it is today, but on the other hand, it is bound to change. I hope my self-reflections are somewhat reflective of the future, but only time will tell. I wish you a safe, healthy, and a very happy future. Thank you.
Hello, Robin Canniford here. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about building impact and insight in your qualitative research. Texts. We're surrounded by them. We read them and produce our own field notes on field notes, and then back to the original texts. It's easy to forget that there's more to the world than words, that there's textures, feelings. You can rub things and the smell comes off on our skin and we carry it away with us. These environments push back on us and we become led by our research noses, by the textures of new things being different to old things. And when we tack back and forth between words and the world around us, if we use our bodies to understand the environments, and if we concentrate on using all of our senses in qualitative research, even the most boring environments can become fascinating. And likewise, in our interviews, we should be asking more than just recollection. We should be asking our interview participants to consider going beyond words and memories and visual media and trying to think about asking how they use their sense of smell and taste and how texture moves them. So that's my first recommendation, and it flows into a second recommendation that qualitative research should be moving. Bodies are never static, so let's take our interviews, make them sensory and full of bodies, and while we do that, let's recognise that interviews can be done on the move in real places. Take them onto the streets, out into nature. Because these are the places where our bodies work and consume. And if we do our research like this, when we realise that every moment of the research process is special and unique, and that our environments construct us as much as we construct them, they push back against us. So whether you're researching customer experience, retail spaces, service experiences, critical marketing, consumer culture theory, understanding the body and the moving world around us, I think will help you to generate novel insights in your research. Good luck.
Hi and welcome. I am Stephan Ludwig. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Melbourne in marketing, and my area of expertise is within digital marketing, communication, and digital marketing analytics. And I was asked to today present quickly on my view of future directions within this field. Let me kick off by saying or explaining why I believe that digital marketing is different from traditional forms of marketing. That primarily has to do with the velocity at which things happen within the digital marketing space, so the speed at which things happen. It also has to do with the volume at which data is generated and used within the digital marketing space. And finally, it has to do with the variety of type of data we're dealing with in the digital marketing space. All three of those characteristics of digital marketing carry very interesting future research implications. For example, if you think along the customer journey, which traditionally is classified into the 6 steps below, we see that in the online space, there are different media used at different points. And so this is very exciting to find out how and these different media and the information therein relate in order to bring the consumer essentially to decide on a purchase. Within those different media types and within the digital marketing domain, there are specific areas of future research that might be of interest, centering around the type of sources for the digital marketing communication. So for example, if we think about consumer reviews, those are essentially messages posted by consumers for consumers. So it's a one-way communication from a consumer to many other consumers. And obviously that is has been proven to be a decisive factor in consumers' purchases. And so it is an interesting topic to study as to how and why these customer reviews are impactful. Also interesting is the more interactive exchange between consumers in a, for example, online forum where they share and discuss different brands and ideas, products and services. Very interesting field context to study for future research. We naturally also still have the one-way communication from firm to consumer. That hasn't ended. It's just moved to the digital space. And so through, for example, the provision of a digital advert, firms inform consumers about their brand, products, and services. The question is, how should those be designed to be effective? Where should they be placed? How should they be structured? And how should they be sequenced? Interesting topics. Finally, the last important communication flow is, of course, between a consumer and a firm directly, for example, through the use of e-customer services, which gained a lot of attention, especially during the past month, where you're essentially removed from the offline world where you had a one-to-one face-to-face interaction with the firm representative. You're not doing that in the online space, mostly through text or audio. And the interesting part, of course, there is how to efficiently do this. Within these different domains, there is 2 special future research topics I'd like to flag up. The first one has to do with the digital multimodalities. So there's a variety of formats in which digital communication happens and digital marketing happens. It happens through numbers. If you think about ratings, the last movie you saw, you looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb to find out what rating is behind that movie to inform your decision. You also have textual, audio, image, and video type of communication and information and data, which is available. And around those different modalities, it'll be interesting to see how they spill over into one another and what firms should take care of when dealing or using one of those means to communicate. Finally, we look into digital dynamics. Now, the interesting thing about digital data and digital marketing is that everything is traceable. Unlike the offline world, where we have no idea where the consumer comes from, in the digital space, we know exactly where he's been. We can trace how he or she got there, where she is today on our website, and why she did or didn't make a purchase. Interesting digital dynamics to look into are message developments, for example, the argument development in a review and how that translates into the impact of a review. Dynamics within entities. So for example, if you think about the content development across a brand's tweets, so several brands' tweets in a sequence would make a content development. How does that development translate into implications for market performance? And then finally, coming back to interactions, the dialogue development between, for example, an employee and a customer in an online space is an interesting thing. How does this dialogue develop, and how can the development of the dialogue inform how the customer relationship is going? That was my quick summary of where I think future research topics are within the digital marketing domain. Thank you, and best of luck with all your research projects.
Hello, my name is Erik Mooi. I'm Associate Professor at the University of Melbourne, and I've been asked by Jill Lai and Diana Scaraboto to produce a short movie about business-to-business marketing, why it's different and why you should be interested in business-to-business marketing. Now, first off, business-to-business marketing is the study of inter-organizational exchange. That is how one firm tries to sell products or buys products from another firm. And this particular focus makes it really quite different from particularly consumer behavior. First off, businesses tend to buy in a fairly rational, complex, and carefully considered manner. If you're buying major industrial equipment or major new technologies, then typically committees get formed that plan for buying such technologies. This means that in those organizations, there's typically direct traces of how these organizations buy these products. That makes it quite different from consumer behavior, where you often have to infer how people made their decisions, but you can't actually observe their decisions. In business-to-business marketing, you often can, but there's other significant differences as well. Business-to-business customers tend to be very much focused on value in use. What does a product do to them? And they're far less interested in the actual consumption or in the acquisition. Buying also tends to be very complex. Buying in business-to-business settings tends to be characterized by a DMU, or decision-making unit, where multiple people are involved. Typically a senior manager, a procurement manager, and other people put together form a committee that buys a certain new product or technology. Now, why is it actually interesting to do research in the area of business-to-business marketing? Well, first of all, there's actually not that many people working in business-to-business marketing, but it's a really big field. In fact, about 2/3 of the Australian economy is focused on business-to-business transactions, leaving about 1/3 for consumer-focused transactions. But the number of researchers in most marketing departments tends to be just one, or not even one. In effect, meaning that the ratio of research problems to academics is really good. There's lots of really important research problems for you to tackle, something that you might not really find in other research areas. Secondly, it's a very interdisciplinary field. There's a lot of research on business-to-business market topics coming from economics, which really makes it stand quite apart from other areas of marketing that tend to be quite influenced by psychology. There's a lot of research from the area of management, operations research, logistics, supply chain, and of course our own field, marketing. And it's this multidisciplinarity that means there are many different journals to target and many different approaches to take. It's an area that isn't really wedded to one particular methodology. For example, there's lots of people working on game theory, there's lots of people working on doing qualitative studies. Qualitative work tends to be quite strong in the area of business-to-business marketing. But there's also quite a lot of people taking more traditional quantitative approaches, or quantitative approaches that tend to be more focused on econometrics and secondary data, including most of my own work. So there's really a broad range of different techniques and approaches to take. Also, in terms of data sources, there's a huge amount of variety. Some people rely on interviews and case studies. Some people rely on surveys. But increasingly, the strong availability of secondary data. And that's certainly where I've tried to build most of my research papers on. Now, what's quite interesting, and I think really good about the field of business-to-business marketing, is that it tends to be quite a small, but also quite a close-knit community that's still very easy to enter. There's an annual conference either organized by the ISBM in the United States or by the EMEC BMM community that tends to be organized in Europe. And it's this alternating set of 2 conferences that means that every year there's an opportunity to meet fellow B2B researchers. There's also online opportunities. ISBM has its own research seminar series. And together with Sudhamani and 2 people from EMEC, we've set up a BROS seminar series, the B2B online research seminar series. It's very easy to find this online and to get involved. And I'd really encourage you to do so. Lastly, and I think importantly, there's a significant number of papers appearing in the field of business-to-business marketing in strong journals such as the Journal of Marketing, the Journal of Marketing Research, the JAMS, but also there's dedicated journals like Industrial Marketing Management, the Journal of Business and Industrial Marketing, as well as many other journals that do take business-to-business papers. And that makes that there's many opportunities to publish and to get your ideas out. Lastly, if you have any specific ideas or thoughts about research questions in the field of business-to-business marketing, or how to get started, or what approaches to take, either reach out to me or reach out to Sudhamani at Monash University, Jona Keranen at, for example, the RMIT, or Ian Wilkinson at the University of Sydney. And I'm sure I'll be forgetting lots of people, but it's a fairly close-knit community. Don't wait too long to reach out, and I'm very sure you'll find an open ear for your research ideas. Thanks very much for your time.
Hi, I'm Julie Ozanne. I'm a professor at the University of Melbourne, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about transformative consumer research, both its past and its future. In 2005, at the Association for Consumer Research, David Mick gave his presidential address, and he coined this term, transformative consumer research, or what we call TCR. It was a really clever branding strategy because marketing scholars had always studied social problems, from health, sustainability, poverty, injustice, but we were separate. TCR has brought us together. We may study different social problems, we may use different theories, we may employ different methods, but what we share is a common vision that we can alleviate suffering and enhance consumer well-being. Like all researchers, we want to understand the world, but we also want to transform it. Let me let you in on a little secret. We're really good at teaching you how to do rigorous research, but we're not so good on having impact. So we've started every other year doing a dialogical conference where we bring scholars in from all over the world, usually about 200, to study social problems. If you're interested, there's a conference coming up in 2021, and the deadline is November 15th. I'll put a link at the end in case you're interested. And if you're thinking, well, I'm just a doctoral student, how can I come? Well, we always make place at the table for junior colleagues. So what is a dialogical conference, and why would you want to participate? Well, there are no PowerPoint presentations. Instead, the 200 scholars show up and they go into 20 different rooms, about 10 per social problem, and they spend 2 days in a room discussing. They share their perceptions, they work through differences, there's a lot of board work, and at the end, there's an outline for a paper. A few months later, and a lot of hard work, and people have written an article that is then submitted to a special issue, and the very best papers are submitted. It's a great way to get research done, but it's also a great way to form a community of scholars. What is the future of TCR? Well, we're a grassroots organization, and we are always generating the social problems. So we're very nimble, and we're able to adapt quickly. The thing we're still struggling with is how to have impact. And so we're now starting a set of conferences called TCR Impact Conferences. And that's where we're going to come together across different social problems to share what works. For example, some of us have been working on relational engagement where we partner with organizations, doing research with them that they can then use and we can publish from. There are a lot of other ways that we can have impact. So I hope I've intrigued you. Thank you for listening, and I'll provide some links about review articles and the upcoming conference.